The house was quiet enough to hear the refrigerator hum. Morning light came in through the thin curtains, and lay across the small kitchen table. Margaret shuffled in, wearing her old blue robe, one hand on the chair for balance, the other rubbing sleep from her eye. On the table, next to her teacup, lay an unfamiliar envelope. It was white, too clean, and placed exactly in the center, as if someone had measured the distance from each edge. Her name was written in Robert's careful, stiff handwriting. No greeting, just Margaret. She paused, fingers hovering over it. For a second she thought it might be a card, or a note about some appointment he didn't want to forget. Then she remembered the way he had avoided her eyes the night before, how he had gone to bed early, without his usual dry joke about the evening news. She sat down. The chair creaked under her, a sound she knew well. Her heart did something she did not know well anymore. It stumbled. Slowly, she slit the envelope open with her thumb. The letter was short. 3 sentences. 4, if she counted the last line. Margaret, I have decided to file for divorce. I will contact a lawyer in the coming days to discuss the details. I believe this is the best decision for both of us. Robert. Her eyes ran over the words, then back again, as if they might change on a second reading. Divorce. Best decision. For both of us. The phrases floated in her mind, like pieces of paper caught in a weak wind, never quite landing. She did not cry. It was too sudden for that. Instead, she noticed small things. The way the ink pressed too hard into the paper, leaving faint grooves. The way he signed only Robert, not Rob as he had in younger days. The way there was no date, no dear, no I'm sorry. She folded the letter along its original crease with careful fingers, and placed it back on the table. The kitchen looked the same as always, the chipped sugar bowl, the plant by the window that needed water, the clock ticking above the stove. But everything felt slightly out of place, as if the room had shifted an inch to the left. Margaret stood and walked to the sink. She turned on the tap, let the water run, then turned it off without filling her cup. Her hands were steady, but her chest felt hollow, like someone had quietly taken something out while she was asleep. 45 years, she whispered, though no one was there to hear it. It was not just the fact that he wanted to leave. People left. People changed. She had seen enough of life to know that. It was the way he had done it, with a letter on a kitchen table, like a bill or a grocery list. No conversation. No chance for questions. No space for her voice. She went back to the chair and sat down again, the letter in front of her. For a long time she did nothing, only listened to the ticking clock and her own breathing. The silence did not comfort her. It felt like a verdict. In that silence, a small, clear thought rose to the surface: if he could end a marriage with ink and paper, then her answer would begin the same way. Margaret remained at the table, long after the sun had climbed higher, warming the kitchen tiles. She held the back of the chair with both hands as she rose, knees stiff, and walked slowly through the hallway. Each step echoed gently in the quiet house. She passed the framed photographs lined neatly along the wall. Robert in his army uniform, their wedding picture at the old church with the peeling white fence, the children on their first day of school, awkward smiles and uneven haircuts. She looked at each image as though studying a stranger's life. In the living room, she lowered herself onto the sofa, the cushions sinking around her. The air felt heavier here. She traced the fabric with her fingertips, grounding herself. Her mind replayed the years like a soft spinning film. Real long road trips in a rust-red car. The cold nights when Robert worked late at the accounting firm. The summers when she cared for his aging mother while juggling her job at the school. She remembered birthdays she planned, illnesses she nursed him through, dreams she set aside when the children were young. Yet she could not find a single memory that explained a letter. Her lips tightened. She breathed out slowly, as if releasing something that had been lodged in her chest. A faint voice rose in her mind, the same voice that had guided her through every difficult moment in her life. Look clearly. Do not hide from the truth. Her heart answered with a quiet ache, not panic, not desperation, but a dawning understanding. This letter was not sudden. It was the final step in a long pattern she had overlooked. Because she wanted to keep peace, she leaned back against the sofa, eyes closing. The house felt strangely large around her now, as though Robert's absence had stretched the walls outward. She could almost imagine him packing a suitcase somewhere, moving methodically, avoiding confrontation the way he had always done. She opened her eyes and looked toward his armchair by the window. The cushions still held the faint impression of his shape. He always sat there reading the newspaper, glasses low on his nose, muttering about the world becoming too fast, too loud. What a strange contradiction, she thought. A man who feared noise, yet created such a quiet wound. Margaret placed her hands on her lap and straightened her back. The sadness settled into something more defined, like a stone with clear edges. She could feel its shape now. She could hold it without trembling. The doorframe across from her had a tiny scratch Robert made years ago while moving a bookshelf. He promised to fix it but never did. She looked at the mark for a long moment. It was small. It stayed. And she had learned to live with it. Not this time, she murmured, a steady resolve slipping into her voice. The letter had taken something from her, but it had also given something back, clarity. She understood now that silence was no longer strength. She needed to respond, not just to him but for herself. She rose slowly and walked toward her small writing desk by the window. Dust motes floated in the sunlight like tiny drifting thoughts. She pulled out a sheet of paper, its surface smooth and waiting. Her fingers curled around the pen. This time, her voice would be written. Margaret positioned the paper squarely before her, aligning its edges with the wooden grooves of the desk. Her fingers tightened around the pen. The house around her was silent, but her mind had become orderly, steady, almost calm. She drew in a breath and began to write. Her handwriting started slow, each letter formed with deliberate care. Robert, I received your letter this morning. The pen paused. She reread the line, then continued. I understand your decision. I will respond in full. She did not write about shock. She did not write about pain. She chose directness, something he had avoided for years. As she wrote, her thoughts moved with clarity. The memories she had revisited earlier now shaped themselves into clean, simple truths. She listed the moments of their life not as grievances, but as facts. The nights she stayed awake waiting for him. The weekends she cared for his parents alone. The plans she canceled so he could pursue promotions. Community events, late meetings. Her pen glided more smoothly now. The lines came without hesitation. I supported your work. I kept our home together. I stood beside you in every season. These are things I do not regret, but they deserve acknowledgement. She sat back for a moment, letting the weight of those words settle. They were not complaints. They were her life, written plainly, without decoration. Her gaze drifted to the small window before her. A sparrow hopped along the railing outside, tapping its beak lightly. Its simple persistence made her smile faintly. Life continued in small, steady movements, something she now mirrored on the page. Margaret leaned forward again, the pen steady in her hand. She shifted the paper slightly and continued writing, her tone firm but calm. A decision such as yours should have been spoken aloud. A marriage deserves a conversation, not a note left on a table. Her voice, captured in ink, felt clearer than the voice she had used for years. Her heart tightened once, not from sorrow now, but from a rising certainty. She was reclaiming space that had long belonged to her. She paused to stretch her fingers. They ached slightly, a familiar reminder of age, but the ache carried purpose. She lifted the pen again and added, I will address every matter, practical, personal, and otherwise. You will have my full response once I have finished gathering my thoughts. Her eyes traced the lines she had written. Methodical, truthful, controlled. It was the opposite of his short, cold message. Margaret placed the pen down carefully. Her hand hovered over the page, absorbing not only the words but the unfamiliar strength behind them. She whispered softly, I will finish this, fully and on my terms. With that, she pulled a second sheet of paper toward her. The next part of her reply would hold truths she had waited far too long to speak. Margaret placed the second sheet before her, smoothing its surface with her palm. Her breath came slow and even, as if preparing for a long walk up a gentle hill. This part of the letter required precision, quiet honesty, delivered without bitterness. She lifted the pen. The first line came quickly, almost on its own. There is something you should know, Robert. I have been aware of your relationship with Mrs. Brooks for some time. The pen hovered as she considered the next words. She did not want drama or accusation. She wanted truth, simple, unadorned truth. The kind she had learned to carry with grace. She continued writing. I did not confront you earlier, because I wished to see if you would speak to me first. You did not. Her hand remained steady. The room around her felt still, as though even the air respected the seriousness of this moment. She could picture Robert at the golf club, laughing a little too loudly, lingering a little too long. She had noticed these things not because she was suspicious, but because she had spent 45 years observing his smallest habits. Her thoughts moved gently, like pages turning. She wrote, You may believe I am hurt by the affair. I am hurt by the silence. Those words settled heavily on the page, weighty, but not cruel. She leaned back in her chair and let the truth rest between her and the letter. It felt lighter now that it was written. The secret she had carried alone no longer belonged solely to her. A soft breeze slipped through the open window, stirring the corner of the paper. Margaret pressed her fingertips lightly against it, steadying the sheet. Her eyes drifted momentarily to the garden outside, where the afternoon sun warmed the tops of the hydrangeas. She had tended those plants for years, pruning them with the same patience she had used to tend her marriage. She lowered her gaze again. If you had spoken openly, we might have faced this together. But you chose distance instead of truth. She paused, her lips tightening at the memory of countless dinners eaten in silence, small opportunities lost to fear or pride. He had always been a man who kept things inside, but she had hoped naively, perhaps that age would soften him. Instead, it seemed age had hardened the walls he built around himself. Margaret's voice stayed low but steady as she murmured to herself, "This should have been said long ago." Her pen moved again. "I write this not to accuse you, but because honesty deserves to exist somewhere between us, even now." When she finished the sentence, a sense of completion settled over her shoulders. The truth was no longer trapped inside her. It now lived on the page, clear and calm, far gentler than the truth she had received that morning. Margaret placed the pen down and folded her hands together, breathing slowly. The sound of the ticking clock returned to her ears, steady and familiar. She felt neither anger nor regret, only clarity. There was more to write, much more, but the hardest truth had finally been spoken. She reached for a third sheet of paper. Margaret placed the third sheet in front of her and aligned it carefully. This part, she knew, required calm, structure, practical decisions stated with steadiness, not emotion. She flexed her fingers once, then took up the pen again. Her first lines were direct. "I will outline my decisions so there is no confusion." She paused, letting the sentence settle. It carried no anger, only clarity. She continued writing, the pen gliding with quiet certainty. "I will remain in the house. It is legally and rightfully mine to keep. I have tended to it for decades, and I will continue to do so." She lifted her eyes to the window. Afternoon light now stretched across the carpet, warm and inviting. She could picture herself there in that same light weeks from now, watering her flowers, brewing tea, reading in the evenings, life continuing with gentle rhythm. Her gaze returned to the page. "I will retain my portion of the retirement benefits. These reflect the years I supported your career without hesitation." Her handwriting had become steady, deliberate. Each word looked like a small pillar, holding its own weight. She continued, "You may collect your personal belongings. Pack them yourself. Take the time you need." She did not write this to punish him. She wrote it because she knew him. Robert disliked the tedious work of sorting and packing, endless details, endless decisions. It would force him to face the reality he had tried to reduce to a single letter. Margaret set down the pen for a moment, and rubbed her thumb along the paper's edge, feeling its smoothness. She whispered softly, "No more silence between lines." The room seemed to agree. She picked up the pen again. "I will not stand in your way. But I will not make this easy for you by disappearing quietly." Her eyes traced the words again. They rang true, firm, but fair. She added one more paragraph, the one she knew would linger longest in his mind. "My life will continue with dignity. What becomes of yours is your own choice." The sentence was simple, yet she knew it held a mirror up to Robert's decisions. It reminded him that she was not the one crumbling. She was the one standing steady. Margaret leaned back in her chair. The house around her felt different now, lighter, less burdened. The words in front of her were not just terms of separation. They were boundaries she should have drawn years ago. She placed the paper neatly on top of the others. 3 pages, each marked with truth, clarity, and her own quiet strength. There was only one task left now: to send the letter in a way he could not ignore. She reached for an envelope. Margaret chose a cream-colored envelope from the desk drawer, thicker paper, the kind people used for important letters. She slid the 3 pages inside, smoothing them gently so the edges aligned. Her hands moved with a slow, practiced steadiness. Nothing in her actions felt rushed. She sealed the envelope and placed it flat on the desk. Under the afternoon light, it looked almost ceremonial, as if it held not just words, but a quiet judgment the world had waited too long to hear. She rose from her chair, joints stiff, and reached for her coat hanging by the door. It was the same coat she wore on grocery trips and evening walks, but today it felt heavier on her shoulders. She slipped her arms through the sleeves, and took the envelope carefully in both hands. The neighborhood was calm as she stepped outside. A few sparrows flitted between branches. The air held the mild scent of cut grass. Margaret walked down the familiar path toward the mailbox at the corner. But halfway there, she stopped. This letter deserved more than a casual drop into a metal box. She turned around and walked back into the house, a firmer resolve settling in her chest. Setting the envelope on the table, she picked up her phone and dialed the number of the local post office. "Do you still offer certified mail with signature confirmation?" she asked softly. "Yes, ma'am," the clerk replied. "We can ensure the recipient signs for it personally." "Good," Margaret said. "I'll be there shortly." She ended the call, took her keys from the hook, and slipped the envelope under her arm as though protecting something fragile. On her way out the door, she glanced back at the quiet house. For the first time that day, it didn't feel like a place of loss. It felt like a place where truth had finally taken root. At the post office, she waited in a short line, her posture straight despite her tired legs. The clerk, a young man with kind eyes, greeted her. "How can I help you today?" Margaret set the envelope on the counter and spoke clearly. "I need this delivered by certified mail. He must sign for it." "Yes, ma'am. I'll prepare the form." She watched as he affixed the stickers and stamps, each movement precise. When he handed her the receipt, she nodded gratefully and tucked it into her purse. As she walked out into the sunlight again, a faint breeze brushed her cheek. She paused on the steps and breathed in slowly. There was a calmness in her chest she hadn't felt in years, an inner stillness that came from doing something fully, honestly, and without fear. Back home, the late afternoon shadows stretched across the living room floor. Margaret sat in her armchair and folded her hands in her lap. The envelope was no longer in the house, but she imagined its journey resting in a mailbag, carried by the postal truck, making its way toward the man who had once shared her life. She could almost picture Robert receiving it, signing for it, and opening it with the same carelessness he had shown her that morning. Except this time, he would not find silence or submission. He would find truth. Truth he could not ignore. Margaret leaned her head back and closed her eyes. The house was still quiet, but it no longer felt like an empty space. It felt like a pause, one she had chosen. And now, she waited, not for him, but for the moment her own life would turn forward. Robert signed for the envelope without thinking. The mail carrier handed it to him with a polite nod, and he muttered a distracted thank you, eyes already shifting toward the doorway. He did not notice the small sticker indicating certified mail. He did not notice the carrier's careful glance. He only noticed the familiar handwriting Margaret's on the front. Inside the house, he set the envelope on the kitchen counter. The room felt strangely hollow without her presence, though he would never admit that aloud. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, then tore the seal open with a quick, impatient motion. The first page unfolded. His eyes skimmed the opening lines, then slowed, then stopped entirely. "I received your letter. I will respond in full." A sharp breath escaped him. Her tone was calm, too calm. He turned to the next lines, the ones detailing her years of support, the sacrifices made quietly while he was busy providing, as he liked to call it. The words did not accuse him, but they pressed against him like steady, unyielding hands. He tried to brush off the sudden heaviness in his chest. "Margaret always overthinks things," he murmured, though his voice lacked conviction. He turned the page. His fingers froze. "I have been aware of your relationship with Mrs. Brooks for some time." The sentence struck him like cold water. His throat tightened. He read it again, slower this time, as if the meaning might change if he gave it mercy. But the words held firm, unmoving, as if Margaret herself stood in front of him, looking directly into him for the first time in years. He sank into the nearest chair, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. "I waited to see if you would speak to me first. You did not." The quiet disappointment in that single line felt sharper than anger. He swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the silence, filling the room thicker, heavier than the silence they had shared in recent years. He moved to the next page, his eyes dragging. "I will remain in the house. I will retain my portion of the retirement benefits." Each line was logical, fair, precise. It was the kind of clarity he had always avoided. He gripped the edges of the paper a little too tightly. Then he reached her final paragraph. The words were simple, unadorned, unmistakably hers. "My life will continue with dignity. What becomes of yours is your own choice." Something inside him, something long held together by pride and routine, cracked. He slumped back in the chair, the letter resting on his knees. A faint ringing filled his ears. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, indifferent to the collapse happening behind its rhythm. Robert lifted a hand to his forehead. His voice came out in a whisper. "What have I done?" He looked around the house, her plants by the window, the neatly stacked books she always dusted, the empty chair where she read in the evenings. Everything suddenly felt distant, like relics of a life he had taken for granted. He reached for his phone, hesitation trembling through his fingers. He dialed her number. The ring sounded once, twice, 3 times. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. He lowered the phone, staring at the small, glowing screen. The silence on the other end felt like a verdict he had sentenced himself to. The letter lay open before him, 3 pages of truth he had run from for years. Truth delivered with the dignity he had abandoned. Truth he could no longer escape. For the first time in a very long time, Robert felt utterly, painfully alone. Margaret woke early the next morning, long before the sun touched the curtains. Her sleep had been light but peaceful. The kind that comes after a hard truth is finally spoken. She sat up slowly, letting her feet rest on the cool floor. For the first time in months, years, perhaps her chest felt open, not tight. She moved through the house with quiet purpose. She brewed tea, watered her hydrangeas, and opened the windows to let in the soft morning air. Nothing in the house had changed, yet the atmosphere felt different, as if her words, now sealed and delivered, had shifted the weight of the walls. As she placed her tea on the table, her phone buzzed once. A missed call. Robert's name appeared on the screen. She looked at it for a long moment, her expression calm. No hesitation. No tremor. She set the phone face down and walked to the garden. Outside, the air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp soil. She knelt by the garden bed and touched the leaves gently. The world felt steady beneath her hands. She had always found comfort in small, grounded tasks: planting, trimming, watching things grow slowly but surely. A group of older women passed the garden gate, waving as they headed toward the community center. One of them called out, "Margaret. Writing club meets at 10. If you want to join us." She hesitated only a second before replying, "I'll be there." Her voice sounded lighter than she expected. Back inside, she changed into a soft gray sweater and swept her hair back. She paused in front of the mirror, not to check her appearance, but to look at herself with fresh eyes. The woman staring back seemed quieter, stronger, rooted. She took her notebook from the shelf, slipped it into her bag, and stepped outside. At the same time, miles away, Robert sat hunched over the kitchen table. Margaret's letter lay unfolded in front of him, its corners softened from repeated reading. He had not slept. His coffee sat untouched, going cold beside him. He traced a finger over her final lines. "My life will continue with dignity. What becomes of yours is your own choice." Those 2 sentences replayed in his mind like a door closing softly but firmly. He had wanted freedom, but what he felt now was emptiness. A hollow ache shaped exactly like the woman he had underestimated. He picked up his phone again, staring at her number, but something stopped him. Shame, perhaps, or the realization that she owed him nothing more. He placed the phone down and pressed both palms to his face. For the first time, he understood. Her reply had not been revenge. It had been truth, and the truth, spoken without cruelty, had become the sharpest lesson of his life. Margaret arrived at the community center, greeting the women with a warm smile. She took a seat by the window, opened her notebook, and let her pen rest between her fingers. The room buzzed with gentle chatter, stories, laughter, shared lives. She felt herself settling into the sound, the warmth, the belonging. She wrote the date at the top of a fresh page. She didn't write about the divorce, or the affair, or the letter. Instead, she wrote, "Today is the first day I choose myself." The words came easily, like water finding its path. As the morning sun rose brighter outside, she lifted her pen again, ready to begin the next chapter. One she would write not out of reaction, but out of intention. Margaret smiled softly. Her life had already begun to turn forward.